So this moment in utter surrender to this moment, in utter surrender to this moment, that it is only ever now. There is only now, and there is only what is. What is here now without a single thought, interpreting, evaluating, and analyzing this moment? What is actually here now, this moment? What is this moment without any interpretation and without a single thought being followed and believed? What is this moment? And where are you? So much distraction in the details and the particulars of the life, and all of it is utterly irrelevant. The external appearance is a reflection of the internal life and how deeply this truth is lived. And so it is to attend to the inner life, we could say. It is to attend to the being, and not so much to the particulars and details of the external life, where the mind imagines that it can make a difference and fix things and resolve things and control things. But all of this is a habituated distraction away from the simple, incredible truth that is the essence nature of all beings. This truth is so incredibly simple, and yet there is a web of learned complexity overlaying the simplicity that is always here. It takes a depth of longing to be able to have the resolve and courage to not attend to the surface of life and the stories and the details that the me thinks are important, but to attend to the inner knowing of the being. But once the impetus of the life is to know this truth, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It has to know itself. And there's many distractions and detours and side routes that can be brought in by the mind. There is a momentum, a trajectory, and that momentum is for the self to know itself, for the essence nature to be discovered and to be lived on the surface of life. It is the naturalness of the being to be. It is the essence nature of the being to simply be. And there is an impulse within the being to be. It's the naturalness. It's the natural intelligence of the essence nature. The nature of the being isn't to attend to the particulars in the story of life, because it's not reality. It's just a reflection. And the reflection is only here to point us to the inner. It's here as proof of the miracle that we are. But if we get confused in the misunderstanding and the story of separation, and believing that the story is relevant and important and to be given the priority lion's share of attention, then we are constantly in a sense of lack and want, because what we are lacking, missing, and wanting is our true nature. All desire, all longing is for the true essence nature, for the self to know itself, for the being to just simply be. And for this knowing to know itself so that life can be known and lived as life itself in the wisdom that can balance and harmonize itself perfectly. We could say that there is a knowing of perfection, and the knowing of perfection is just simply what is here now, what is here now, what is here now. It is not a mood that we create with the mind that covers things over, that says everything is perfect. It is to face whatever is here now and to know that if it is here, that somehow it is perfect. And this is true surrender. True surrender is to know the perfection of whatever is here, whether it is what the me wants or not. The surrender is to recognize that whatever is here is somehow perfect, is somehow God, is somehow the flow of divine grace, and is here in perfection. It is not for the me to learn a lesson. It is to see a reflection and to receive the reflection that can point us more deeply to the being, to the inner knowing of the being that is the true essence of all beings. And so just this moment here now, without thought, without interpretation or evaluation, just this moment, just as it is, to leave it alone, to not get involved at all, but to just simply be here. That it has nothing to do with thought, has nothing to do with interpretation or trying to understand anything. It is just to simply be here. To be here as the witnessing awareness to start with, to be here and just watch, to see what is here as the aware being, but not to get involved, just to watch. That there is nothing to do, nothing to change, nothing to fix, nothing to control, nothing to resolve, nothing to attain. There is nothing to do. Everything is happening as a flow of grace. Life is living itself perfectly. And life knows how to live itself and to balance itself and harmonize and align itself. It knows how to untangle the discordant patterns of consciousness and bring them into an aligned, harmonized knowing of true essence nature. And so there is a divine plan, but it is not a plan for the future, for the me. The divine plan is a natural order in the flow of consciousness, a natural intelligence, an intelligence that knows. And when we come to the now, to the simplicity of being and knowing the being that just is, we open to the flow of intelligence. We open to the simple wisdom that just knows. that everything is exactly as it is. We could not even say as it should be or needs to be. It just is as it is. It's so simple. It's so immediate, right? There's no sense of evaluation or interpretation. There's no creating of moods around it. It's an immediate, there's an intimacy with this knowing that all is as it is, and that is it. There's no even subtle evaluation of that. It's just this moment, plain and simple, just simply being. Does not need any overlays or decoration, does not need any spice. Let's keep this moment sattvic and pure in its essence nature. It does not need spicing up with interpretation and story. Just this moment, free of all embellishment, just this moment, just as you are, just simply being here, this moment, here now. The felt sense of being is the felt sense of simple freedom. And this freedom is the knowing of the being itself, the being that just simply is. And so in this felt sense of being, just to feel the stillness, the silence, and the simplicity. If there is movement of mind, it is just to watch it, but not to go towards it and not to engage in the chatter, just to be aware and more deeply to just simply be here. It's not about stopping the movement of mind. It's not about changing what is happening in the body. It is just to be here. Everything just as it is. The surrender, the natural surrender of life, just living itself exactly as it is. Surrendering into this moment, surrendering into this moment, surrendering into this moment, just simply being. It is to let go of all that we can gather in meaning and attempts at understanding, the meanings that we give to things, that nothing has any meaning. It is scary for the mind to imagine that nothing has any meaning. But this moment with no meaning is freedom. This moment without the layers of interpretation and all of the attempts to flower and embellish the life into an idea of my life, my good life, right? It's all completely and utterly irrelevant if the longing is for freedom. If the longing is for freedom, it is to follow the longing for freedom into the depths of this moment, into the depths of the felt sense of being here now, and to feel the emptiness, the openness, to be the being that has no content and no details, to be the being that is utter emptiness and total openness, open receptivity, open awareness, that the true essence nature of all is this blissful emptiness, an openness that just simply is. It is the big, wide open space in which all happening is appearing to happen. But let us focus upon the space to discover that the space, it is an infinite spaciousness, that it is an infinite, unbounded being that has no edges and has no restraints or constrictions in any way. That this is an unbounded being that is utterly free. When we come to the felt sense of being, the felt sense of simply being here, the felt sense itself opens to the recognition, the remembering that there is freedom here, and this being that is the essence nature is utterly free, has never ever been bound, and that this emptiness is an open, wide field. It is empty of content, empty of things, and yet full of the knowing of itself. So full in the knowing of itself. And this knowledge, this wisdom is everything. This is the aliveness of life. And so as we come to the felt sense of being, we come to this felt sense of the aliveness in the presence. And this aliveness is the aliveness of your own presence, recognition of your own presence of being. It is alive as it recognizes itself, as it feels itself being here. It is alive with the recognition. And this aliveness is consciousness, conscious of itself. And the consciousness has this frequency of aliveness. And so in the felt sense of being, the felt sense of being, the being knowing itself through simply being itself, it's alive, alive with its own presence, alive in the recognition of its own presence. And so to come to this aliveness, to feel the aliveness in the presence, is to feel the consciousness, consciously being aware of itself and alive and awake to its own presence. There is too here a sense of deep, silent peace. When we come to the being, there is a sense of peace, of stillness, of simple, silent being. We may come first more to the sense of the aliveness, or we may come to the sense of stillness. Now it may seem, how can stillness and aliveness both be here? And yet the stillness itself is alive in the recognition of itself. The silence itself is alive in the recognition of itself. So the aliveness is not in any way contrary to the depth of silence. It is as the silence knows itself, as the being knows itself. The knowing is the aliveness, that there is an aliveness that is the conscious recognition. So when we open to the depth of longing, that what we are longing for, it does not matter what we think we are longing for. It is known in the wisdom what is longing for what, because the only truth here is that the self is longing for itself. Love is longing to be resting in the depths of loving itself. Nothing else is ever going on. So the intelligence knows what is going on. And so it matters not how we might interpret, but words are welcome to flow. a longing for freedom, a longing for God, a longing for truth, for love, for the unconditional, a longing for awakening, a longing for Ma, for divine knowing, wholeness. It does not matter. As long as we do not give meaning to those words and allow those words to be a distraction and give us a mental sense that we really know what we are looking for. Because when we think we know what we are looking for, we constantly overlook what is actually here. We constantly overlook the deep, silent being because the mind has an idea of what it wants and what it is looking for and what that is like. But the mind knows nothing about the awake being. The mind knows nothing about universal consciousness. It is only when mind consciousness collapses, surrenders, and merges into universal consciousness that the knowing of what this truly is, what this being truly is, can really anchor itself. And it anchors itself in the knowing of itself. Cannot be imagined in any way by the mind that what this truth really is. It cannot be imagined. It cannot be imagined, even through reading about what this truth really is, even through listening to other beings' accounts, cannot be known because the mind will always be in a concept of it. It is a complete surprise to discover what you are in truth, a complete surprise, and yet so incredibly familiar because you have never ever left yourself and you have never not been this awake, aware being. You have never ever been away from yourself. And so there is a part of us that knows what we are in truth. We know this. And this is the part that is looking and longing. That's why we have this longing, because this part already knows. It is not a concept or an idea in the mind. It is to come back, simply come back to a depth of relaxation where the remembering brings this familiar knowing. And we find the closest possibility of this in the resonance where truth is recognized, right? So as these words come, there is a recognized remembering that starts to resonate because the part that already knows itself, the infinite unbounded part, starts to resonate in the aliveness of knowing, starts to resonate and recognize and remember the deeper truth that is underneath the mind consciousness and the story and the happenings on the surface of life. Consciousness itself starts to feel the resonant aliveness and recognizes itself. It starts to recognize and remember this alive presence. And it starts to feel this resonance enlivened and awake, right? This is the awake field. This is the true awake field. And you see, there's no one here. There's no one here that's awake or that knows anything. It's this aliveness, alertness of this awake field of consciousness that already knows itself. And it's all about the relaxation and dropping into a deep, soft openness, a soft, receptive openness an emptiness, a clarity, and a simplicity in the felt sense of just simply being. And then this remembering of what this truth is starts to resonate, and it makes no sense to the mind. And there's no point trying to understand or look for anything, because only in the absence of things is this resonance truly enlivened and felt. So as these words come, the words are carrying the aliveness. And as the aliveness comes forward, it's like a code and an offering. And as it is received and attuned to, there is an enlivening in the field of consciousness, where we are one, where we are the same, and where we have never, ever been any different, where we are love, where we are kindness and openness. And you see, this love is longing for itself. It's longing to merge all the way into itself in every single tendril, fiber of its being. And that pull into itself is what creates the longing. It creates the felt sense of longing, of yearning. And this is like a magnetic force field of the self being pulled to itself, the being being pulled to itself. And this is where the snowball is rolling down the hill, because this force field, this pull, this draw, there's nothing that we can do to stop it, and nor would we want to. Although sometimes the mind might imagine it would like to. There's nothing that we can do, because once this trajectory, this momentum is started, it's a certainty that this pull, this force field, this magnetic pull of the self to itself, it is going to do everything and anything that it takes to get all of itself. We could say that love will return for all of itself. It will return again and again and again. So deep is love's commitment to itself that it will return again and again and again. It will never abandon itself. It will never leave itself out in the cold in any kind of illusion of separation. Love, true love, will keep coming back for itself. And this true love coming back for itself, it has nothing to do with the surface of life and relationship dynamics and people and anything like that. It is just about the inner world and this deep pull into yourself. This deep pull of love to love is a pull into the love that you are, into the love that is without conditions, and into the love that in truth is just this big, wide open field of openness. It is holy openness. This holy, holy openness is true love. True love is what is here when there are no stories and dynamics playing, where there is no separation. Love just is. Love is this flow of grace, this flow of consciousness that is intelligent and in the knowing of itself, and flowing naturally to know itself all the way through. So the longing that we have for love is the longing for the self. Love has been misdirected out into the play of the world, onto the surface of life, looking for itself in people and things and experiences and relationships. But love, when the pull of love to itself turns inward and turns to truly face itself. It is an asking that is so deep and so intimate that can bring up a lot of fear, because this depth of intimacy is an invitation to face yourself, all of yourself, to meet yourself, to meet your divinity, to meet your purity, to meet your naturalness, your holiness. We have learnt to deny this. We have learnt that we are lacking, that we are not enough, that we are unlovable and unworthy. But it is not true. We are the purity, the love, the divinity, and the wholeness that we seek. We are already everything that we are seeking. We are already everything that is longed for. But the invitation is a bold one. It is a bold invitation that asks us to turn inward and face ourselves so fully. It requires a depth of honesty, a kind of radical honesty, where we have to have the willingness to shine the light upon all of the habits and the conditionings that are pulling us away into distraction, so that we can allow our turning inward to be so full and so rich, so that we can illuminate all of the threads on the surface of life that want to distract, that are habituated to numb and not to feel and not to be present to this moment just as it is. So this moment just as it is, and facing this moment just as it is facing yourself. It is to face yourself so fully that there is a facing of all of life, a receiving the grace of all of life. But first, we are given this incredibly profound invitation to face the deep peace and stillness of our essence nature. We are offered this outstretched hand from our own innermost being. There is this outstretched hand that is unconditionally loving and kind and patient. It is an unbounded, compassionate field of awake peace. It is the peace that we are, the deep peace, the deep, silent stillness that we are. And we are offered this outstretched hand from our innermost being to turn and meet the being that is the essence nature of all beings, to meet our true nature, to remember the essence nature. And it's right here now, in this moment, and this moment, and this moment. Every moment is absolutely full and rich with a divine invitation to turn to yourself, to feel the felt sense of being, and to be here so deeply, so fully, so present to your own alive presence, so as to meet yourself and remember yourself, to meet yourself just as you are. And you see, meeting yourself just as you are does not mean stopping the mind and creating an environment or any kind of mood or situation that excludes anything. It is about just being here so fully and not turning away from anything. It is to recognize that we are not creating an experience that the person has of peace or silence or going inwards. We are recognizing that right here in the fullness of this moment, there is a vast, zoomed out perspective of seeing that is the aware being, that is aware of all the happenings, can see it all, everything, and yet is not touched or disturbed in any way. And this is how we come to know the freedom of our essence nature right here now, that we're not creating an experience, that we are coming to the end, the edge of experience, so that we can know the fullness and truth of the being that is never ever disturbed, never ever touched in any way. And this is the peace, the stillness of the being that is right here and is always here, is never ever not here. It is to relax. It is to be the openness and to come to this open availability where nothing is wanted, where there are no expectations, where there are no ideas of what this is all about, where there's no me that wants anything. And there is an awareness that is watching the moving, changing elements, the thoughts, the feelings and sensations, and the aware being. It has its own deep felt sense of being that is grounded, rooted, just simply in the knowing of itself. And it is completely independent of all the moving, changing, completely independent. It is the zoomed out, relaxed, vast openness that is the boundless being. Can only know this through being this, cannot imagine it or create an experience of it. It is a revelation, a complete wild revelation that this boundless being is always here, that this untouched sanctuary that is pure, perfect peace is always here, that there is this silence that is never ever touched by any single thing, and it is always here. So as these words come, it is to not look for this with the mind, but to attune to the resonance, because the resonance is already here. It is this that is already here. And where you feel the resonance and there is an attunement and an enlivening, there is remembering and recognition. And it is to just be here. Just be here. There's nothing to do. The intelligence is doing it all. So there is a flow of happening in consciousness. Consciousness is alive and awake to itself, and it is getting more enlivened within the flow of itself. And as it is enlivened in the flow of itself, it starts to spark flashes of remembering. And the flashes of remembering are consciousness consciously awakening and remembering itself, like firing, igniting, sparking up the remembering. And we are made of this, right? This is not an experience. We're not creating an idea or an experience. We are made of this. This is what we are made of. We are consciousness. We are flows of intelligence. So as there is a feeling of an enlivening and an aliveness, it is your essence, it is your fabric, your substance, the blissful substance that you are made of. And of course, the substance is emptiness, blissful emptiness. But it is this that is coming alive in the remembering of itself. It's not an experience, it's not mental, it's not conceptual. It is this moment, awake and alive, in the recognition of itself. And so it's this moment, just as it is, this perfect, holy moment, just as it is. This is who you are. This is your true nature. This is the one true nature. This is where we are the same and where we are in love, where we are happy and joyful and exuberant and vital here in the awake field of being. So it has nothing to do with what is happening in the mind or the life or the body. This is an alive, awake field. And so as there is a recognition of the resonance, the recognition is the alive resonance of consciousness. We could say vibrating at a frequency of recognition of itself. And your whole nervous system is a cosmic, universal nervous system. It's actually consciousness resonating at a finer frequency. And so what happens is, as you start to recognize, and there's an enlivening, it's your nervous system, the consciousness is your nervous system that starts to come alive in the recognition of itself. And it starts to push forward any stresses. It starts to push the stresses right forward, push them out of the way, like a chimney sweep. It's giving everything a good cleaning, a good purification. It's pushing all the stresses forward. So sometimes there can feel a little agitation or a little bit of a sensation, or there can even be a real spinning out into the mind. But just to watch it all, because none of it matters. This is the grace, this is the glory, that none of it matters. It does not matter what is happening right now. Everything is perfect. And we're not saying that as a spiritual mood. We're not saying, oh, everything is perfect. We're saying everything is perfect because this is just what is, right? There's no moody kind of mental embellishment of this perfection. It's just a plain and simple, if this is what's here, then this is perfection. Then this is God. This is the glory. This is the divine plan, right here, right now, just like this. So whatever is happening, whether you are feeling the bliss and the being and the enlivening, or whether there is stress in the nervous system, whether there is a sense of the mind being busy, it doesn't matter. Because whatever is happening on the surface of life is irrelevant in terms of the being that is utterly independent and free. Underneath the surface of life and the whole flow, we could say the whole appearance of life, is the source of life, is the silent source of everything. So underneath, behind, we could say, backstage, maybe we could say, we can step off the stage. We can just step off the stage, enter the green room, right? The green room is where the actors and actresses go in between their, whatever that's called, where they come out on the stage and perform. They come into the green room, right? We can enter the green room, right? Here in the green room, you are yourself, right? You let go of the persona, you let go. It doesn't matter what costume you're wearing, you're just knowing yourself. So coming to the being, it's like coming off of the stage of life, entering the green room, the sanctuary of being. And in the sanctuary of the being, you just relax and you just feel this gorgeous truth of who you are. And it doesn't matter what character you're playing on the stage, doesn't matter what costume you're wearing, doesn't matter what's playing out. It's this recognition that the being, it's never affected. This truth of who you are, it's never, ever affected, right? And here we really, as the awareness, we can really see the stage play. What grace if we can see through that whole stage play while we've still got a body. And we can move on the surface of life, recognizing that we're wearing a costume and we're playing a character, but somehow the deep knowing of our true essence nature can emanate through, and that we're not moving in a way as the character, that we might still look like the character, but we're emanating this true nature. So we come to the green room, the being, we come to the felt sense of being, and we relax into this essence knowing, this deep core knowing of what is the true nature, the simplicity of being. And it's this felt sense, it's familiar. There's a sense of home here. There's a sense of that you've never left here, that this has always been here. And there's so much beauty here. There's a lightness because there is an emptiness of content, right? The story doesn't matter. So this felt sense of emptiness, this felt sense of openness, because there's no protection, no guarding, no defending against anything. You're just in this essence nature, fully open, can feel the freedom. And here from the green room, you just melt, melt into this vast open landscape that has like a golden hue to it, a golden hue that is just this luminous openness, just a depth of relaxation where everything is golden and soft. And it's this felt sense of just being home, being yourself, being unguarded, not needing to engage in any of the surface of life. And so we don't need to come back to the mind and say, well, how am I going to live? What am I going to do? And what am I going to eat? And how am I going to feed my family? We don't have to worry about any of that stuff that the mind gets concerned about, because the truth is that life is just living itself, and it always has been, and it's going to continue in this moment, in this moment, in this moment. All of the things that we imagine that we have to do and take care of, it turns out that it's just not so. And if it doesn't happen, it's obviously not supposed to happen, because if it was supposed to happen, then it would happen, because this is a perfect plan. This is a divine plan. And we get to see how we tie ourselves up in knots with all of these ideas of how life should be. And we start to find out, how does life want to be? What does God want here? Because what is happening is what God wants, where we're not controlling and trying to manipulate the picture of the external, that we turn inward, and we're in this perpetual surrender of life being in surrender to itself, in the felt sense of being. And we are aware when there is a pattern, a habitual pattern or a conditioning playing, because it feels tight and uncomfortable, or maybe some resistance or stress arises. And all of this is okay, because in the green room here, the deep sanctuary of relaxation, we recognize it doesn't really matter. It's just a play. It's just a story. Life is just living itself out. So there are layers and layers of seeing how this all works. The intelligence unfolds the deeper and deeper seeing within our own natural being of how this process works. First of all, we are offered this outstretched hand to come into the innermost being, come in to the inner sanctuary. Stop running around on the surface of life, imagining that the story, that the play is reality. Come to the sanctuary, to the green room, the deep resting place of simply being. and in the felt sense of simply being. Really revel in the sense of relaxation and freedom here. Don't be looking for anything. Don't be looking to understand or to fill the emptiness with more things. Just be empty. Be empty and revel in the emptiness. There is sanctity in the emptiness, holiness in the emptiness. It is such a deep and profound silence, such a deep stillness, that just to really be here and to feel the felt sense that you are peace. You are the peace that has been longed for. Now, to attain peace can be spoken of as the goal of a human life. To attain peace, true peace, is to see through the illusion of separation and to recognize that the play of life on the surface is not what it's all about. That the true purpose of a human life is for consciousness to consciously awaken to its true essence nature, and it uses the embodiment, the play of life, as the means for that. So the true purpose of the human life is to know yourself and to live this truth as deeply as it is accessible, and to open to the possibility that there are frequencies and realms that cannot be imagined, and that we can open and open and open deeper and deeper into our own intelligence, our own consciousness. So we are offered this outstretched hand to know the peace, the sanctuary of the silent being, to see through the illusion of separation. Really see through and know without question that what I am is not a person, not an individual separate from the whole, but what I am is the natural being, the simple natural being. And in the knowing of this is where the innermost being takes its own hand and merges into this deep remembering. And the remembering pops the bubble of illusion, can never ever come back, because it pops this whole illusion, and suddenly there's a knowing, a clear knowing of who you are in truth. And this is the deep silent peace. This is the Shiva aspect, right? The Shiva awakening, we could say, to being the pure awareness. Now the being, it knows itself, and this knowing is alive. Now this aliveness is the flow of life. This aliveness is the flow of Shakti Ma. This aliveness is the flow of Shakti, and this flow of Shakti Ma, this flow of life living itself, the aliveness that's flowing within itself, this whole wide open infinite field flowing within itself in the knowing of itself, surrendering into itself and surrendering into itself. And this is how the flow of life moves as a flow of grace to bring forward everything that we need to meet and see through. Right? This flow, this is the process of refinement that brings us to the unified knowing, the knowing that all there is God, the Atman. All there is the self. That this too, and this too, and this too. But we cannot create this as a mood. We have to meet everything that happens so fully, so that there is a merging on the level of consciousness And the merging on the level of consciousness is when we, as the openness, open to receive anything that is discordant in the field, and so that it may merge and surrender itself into itself, so that consciousness can know itself fully in the light of awareness. Now, the way that grace flows is that we can open to the Shakti flow of refinement before there's the full Shiva bang that pops everything. And there's an intelligence that is orchestrating how all of this works. But we speak of the whole, so that however this is moving and flowing uniquely at each point as it is unraveling, can hear itself and recognize itself and attune and align. Because of course there is no measure and there is no linear ladder system to climb. It is this gyroscopic, incredible, alive flow of consciousness, right? This is the flow of love, this unconditioned flow of love, of life, living itself, loving itself, moving to intimately merge all the way with itself in and as absolutely everything in order to know itself all the way through. And there is an intelligence at play here. The intelligence is the field of consciousness that is intelligent, awake, and alive in the knowing of itself, flowing as life. And it knows how, it knows the process. And so it does not need any micromanaging, does not need to be understood, because there is a depth of wisdom in the intelligence where it just knows itself. Remember, there's a trajectory, a momentum. It's flowing within itself, and it wants to go all the way through. It is not content to rest anywhere that is not fully satiated divine wholeness. It knows, it already knows its own wholeness. And as it knows its own wholeness, it is moving to bring that depth of utter wholeness, divine wholeness, to everything on the surface of life, right? So no compromise here in this unfolding, not in the way that the mind imagines, oh, I'm probably good here. Right? This is where there's a trajectory. This is that magnetic force field. And that force field just gets stronger and stronger and stronger. We come to a point where there's no resisting that force field. There's just a being taken and taken and taken. And this sense of being taken and taken and taken, this is life surrendering to itself again and again and again. There's no more personal. There's no one trying to resist it. Life is just surrendering into itself and into itself. And there is, we could say, a depth of being pulled even more inward. And yet at the same time, the flow on the surface of life is so clearly flowing and creating everything that it needs in order to know itself more deeply, more fully, more perfectly, right? And that momentum is that Atman can know itself as Brahman, that consciousness can collapse so fully into its purity that the pure awareness stands alone. Let's say the merging of the Shiva and Shakti, the pure awareness and the pure consciousness merges. The sense of the Shiva and the Shakti merges the silent being and the dynamic being, merges it merges in at the point that is awakening more and more deeply to itself. Of course, it's already merged, it's already one. And as the one, it's already Brahman, it's already Ma, it's already divinity. But it has to merge in your lived experience. It has to fully merge in the lived experience. Consciousness has to fully wake up to itself at every single point in the field, to merge fully into itself all the way through, right? So that's where the lived experience is, where the refinement is happening. The refinement, the process of life living itself is being lived, where the point and its infinity, the point and its infinity is awakening to itself in and as absolutely everything. Of course, there's no personal here. There's no sense of a me here, but there is a sense of this mechanism, the point, right? Which is just one point in the whole infinity. And we know that what we are is the whole infinite field, exactly the same, one infinite being, awake to itself. And yet at the point, there is this life living itself, but it's not living in any separation or division or fragmentation. It's living itself as part of the whole. It's one flow of consciousness. This is what we are. This is what we are made of, right? We are not what we have imagined ourselves to be as a mind and body. Mind and body are just flows of intelligence, flows of consciousness. So as these words come, it is just to attune with the resonance of remembering, because you are this now, you are made of this is what you are. And so it is to feel the resonant attunement where the knowing is already here. Where the knowing is already here, there is a felt sense of recognition, of remembering. It does not make any sense to the mind, so we cannot carry it to the mind and try to hold on to it or understand it, because it will stagnate very quickly and suddenly feel like flatline, because it's not alive and awake to itself. The alive awakeness is here now. It's in the felt sense of being. It's in the deep peace, the stillness, the silence, and it's in the alive, awake flow, flowing within itself. Life in surrender to itself, again and again and again. And yet it's always now, now, now. Such an intimacy, such a love, such a willingness, such a freedom to just keep falling into itself and falling into itself. And when it meets a part of itself that is discordant or a little clunky, then it just meets itself and welcomes itself, opens to itself, in order to merge that pattern of consciousness fully into itself. So there is then a smoothness. And the felt sense of this is your nervous system throwing off stress, releasing stress, purifying, transforming. It's your lived experience, right? Your lived experience now already can be the flow of life living itself, this Shakti awakening, this flow of life living itself, refining within itself. And every taste of the Shiva aspect of pure awareness, of pure being, of deep knowing of yourself is forging a deeper and deeper rooting, anchoring into the Shiva aspect until the bubble bursts. until there is an unquestionable, undoubtable knowing of who you are. That you are the deep, silent, still being that is immaculate and pure. That you are the self that knows itself, and you have never ever been anything other. The knowing of this can be deep, but the surface of life will continue to play out everything that is needed in order to bring everything home, so that love can love every single thread into a divine submission, merge that flow of intelligence, of consciousness into itself, so that we can come to a deeper and deeper resonance of knowing, that we are deepening into the unified field of being the deep, awake, silent being, and the flow of life flowing within itself. And there is this sense of it not being two aspects, right? Because it's not, we could say two sides of one coin, it's one. But as we open, we can notice these aspects quite strongly, the two sides of the coin. But it's one truth, one freedom, one being, one wholeness. The intelligence knows the subtle flows of intelligence and the process of how consciousness is unfolding to itself, opening to itself, opening like a flower that is blossoming, using the deep, fertile ground of a life lived as the means to nourish itself, to open and open and open into the radiant luminosity of wide open heart. The self knowing itself is this wide open heart. So we go inward, into the innermost being. We take the outstretched hand and we just keep falling in and in and in. And here is where we shift the perspective so that we are always seeing life from the zoomed out perspective of awareness, that we are just the stillness that is watching as life lives itself, and the knowing, the aliveness of the knowing is that recognition that we are life flowing. We are all of life. And this flow of life is opening to more of itself, to purify and transform, to transmute everything that does not know itself in its purity, to bring everything home to wholeness, to weave all of those disparate threads back into the fine tapestry of the unified field, merging all the flows into the incredible, profound flow of grace flowing within itself. And this is the momentum that we can feel as a longing to start with. And then it is felt as this surrender and this devotion, this pure devotion. And the purity of devotion is just devotion for the sake of devotion, the self falling into itself, being magnetically pulled deeper into itself, loving itself, and just so intimate with itself, right? There's no object of devotion. It's just a flow of devotion. And it is this flow of devotion where the sacredness, the holiness of Ma is hiding, the deeper frequencies of divine wholeness are hiding right here in the flow of devotion, right? Nothing is really hiding, it's all right here, but we don't come to this until we are resonating at the frequency. So we are refining the frequency. We're refining the frequency to finer and finer feelings, finer and finer values of consciousness, finer and finer feelings. We're transmuting, we're distilling, alchemizing the consciousness of our lived experience. We're alchemizing it and opening to finer and finer frequencies so we can discover and remember the divine wholeness that is right here, that we have been all along. And we recognize here the purity, the incredible innocence, and the immaculate nature of what we are in truth. We can feel the frequency of this purity, of this divinity, can feel the fine frequency. It's, in a way, it's shattering to feel such innocence and purity, and it shatters all our ideas that we are not good and holy and pure, because here we find holiness, purity, and we discover that what it is our own essence nature. It's what we are when we are not looking in the world of delusion and corruption. When we are looking in the innermost being, we find that purity and innocence, that divinity is right here and has been here all along. We find out what God is. We find out what Ma is. And we find it to be this resonant frequency of light, and that we are this light resonating with this very, very fine, fine frequency. So as these words come, it's always just to feel the resonance, because every being is made of this. You can feel on some level the frequency reverberating and resonating in the recognition of itself. It's where the like meets like, right? The resonance, the transmission is that which is already here, speaking to itself. And as it resonates and sparks, so these sparkles of the sameness start to glimmer and shimmer and come alive, start to awaken to a deeper remembering of what we are, can feel the resonance. It's so subtle, and yet so profound and so alive here. It's in the aliveness. So we follow the alive presence to carry us into the aliveness of life. We follow the longing to bring us into the flows of life living itself. We follow the pull, this incredible pull, this magnetic force field. The force is the power of divine wholeness. That's this self-sustaining, spinning, spiraling, brilliant luminosity. And it's so self-sustaining and resonant and powerful. It's a force field, and it's moving to pull itself in and transmute and pull itself in. It's feasting upon itself. It could be felt like it's devouring itself. It's just using itself as fuel, It's using itself as fuel to sustain itself and to know more of itself and to open to finer and finer frequencies of itself. So this is what is happening here now. Everything that is spoken because it is here now. This is the landscape, the golden landscape of consciousness that is here. So of course it's not of the mind and it cannot be understood, and yet the resonance can be felt where it is enlivening, the peace, the remembering, where it is enlivening the aliveness of the field of intelligence, where there's a sense of, we could say a sense of understanding, but it's not a mental understanding. It's the intelligence recognizing itself. And as it recognizes itself, it deepens into itself. As it deepens into itself, it's alive and awake within itself, and it can feel its immaculate, infinite, unbounded nature, can feel the freedom and the simplicity of just simply being here, and how this moment surrenders into this moment here now, surrenders into this moment here now, surrenders into this moment here now. Utter emptiness, openness, zoomed out, vast open field, aware of the moving, changing, and yet completely independent and undisturbed. Just resting here, zoomed out, watching, and yet not watching, looking for objects, just watching yourself, witnessing yourself, and allowing that witness to collapse into itself, so that the witnessing is from everywhere. That the witness is at every point in the infinite field, witnessing itself. The whole of life is watching itself, living itself. Hmm. To notice the silence, the stillness that is the essence nature of being, the pure awareness, purely aware of itself, simply being aware. Hear the peace, hear the silence, hear the self simply being itself. Hmm. Just simply being yourself, just as you are, just like this.